We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button, because a supportive community is a strong community. Good day, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov. We love supporting new and lesser-known works here on Musical Theater Radio, and we have a show called The Sampler Platter, where we feature these new and lesser-known shows and promote them because we feel these shows deserve to get a voice, just like every other show out there. And today, we are speaking with one of the creators of those shows that we promote. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rebecca Aparicio to the show. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And how badly did I butcher your last name?
You were so close. It's Aparicio, but you're very close.
I always ask beforehand, and I forgot to ask how you pronounce the names this time. So I apologize. But thank you for enduring my terrible skills for names. So how we always start every show is I ask my guests to give us their 30-second bio. So in 30 seconds, who is Rebecca?
Okay, 30 seconds. That's tough. I'll try to make it short. I am a writer-director based in New York City. I have been working on new musicals primarily as a writer and director of my own work. And then I've also been really fortunate in the last few years and been assisting and doing associate work as a director off-Broadway and regionally. So that's kind of the little sum up.
Perfect. That was like 12 and a half seconds. So that's perfect.
Oh, great.
We got lots of time for the rest of the interview now. So.
Awesome.
So before we delve into your shows and what you're doing right now, I want to find out, were you always into musical theater, or was that something that came to you a little bit later in life?
No, I always was. I mean, I guess since I was a little kid, I remember my parents went and saw the Phantom of the Opera, and they brought a cassette tape back from the show, and I kind of just got the bug then. And then I fell in love with listening to older musicals, and I would always be, I was like 6 and really interested in Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and the whole movie musical era. So I was always a little odd in that way, I guess.
It's funny. So many of my guests say Phantom is the gateway musical for them.
Yeah, it is.
It was for me too. I know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then you realize, okay, there are other shows out there. And then
exactly.
And then Phantom just falls down your list of favorite shows. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's discovery.
Exactly. It was still the way in. Something really exciting about that music.
So you live in New York. Have you always lived in New York?
No, I've lived here for about 11 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Miami, Florida.
Okay.
Which is, I feel like I'm very connected to my Cuban identity, because everybody down there is, either Cuban or from somewhere else. So you grow up very bilingual, very much in the culture. And then my family moved to Alabama when I was 14, which was a little bit of a shock, if you will.
Yeah.
So then I did high school and college there, and then moved up to New York.
Wow.
So that's kind of where I've been.
Could you find 3 completely different places to go?
Yes. I don't think they could have been more different.
But that's great. That builds who you are, right? You get to experience the Miami aspect, and then the Alabama aspect, and then move it up to New York City. That builds who you are, which is incredible.
Yeah, totally. I say, I grew up in Miami, and then I moved to Alabama. I was like, oh, I'm a minority. I didn't know that. Or, that was a term at the time. Yeah. And then going back to New York, and then it's like, oh, I'm like everybody else again. So it's like a very interesting journey. We're like stepping stones.
That's funny. So you went to Alabama. You said you went to school there. What did you go to school for?
I went to school for musical theater as a performer. So I got my BFA in musical theater at a tiny college called the University of Montevallo. And that's where I fell in love with writing musicals, because our homecoming tradition was 2 musicals that competed against each other instead of a football game. Yeah. So student written, student produced is a big deal in Alabama. Football is like king.
Yes.
And it was 2 musicals, and we had cheerleaders and the whole thing.
That is awesome.
It's very intense and very culty. And then I was like, oh, I can make my own musicals. And then we bit the bug, and here we are.
That's awesome. Do you have the musical theater equivalent of the Heisman Trophy for that competition?
Yes, it wasn't a trophy. It was even like more like theatrical than that. It was the school newspaper would publish 2 newspapers with the winner and a big photo of a production photo, but you wouldn't know until that evening because there'd be 3 judges. And so everybody gets on stage, each cast, and you're both there and you're waiting for the announcement, which is snuck into a speech. They sneak in one line of the musical into a very long speech. And then once you'll know, somebody will start screaming if they hear the line. It's top secret too. And then the newspaper comes out, and that's the trophy.
That is awesome. That sounds like so much fun. I've never heard of that. So,
sorry for that tangent.
Now, so what were the 2 musicals about down there that year for you?
Oh my gosh, we had like everything. We had one musical that was about prehistoric times, and it was called Rock Musical, and a play on words there. And then we had one about disgruntled princesses throughout, fairy tales. It was the fiercest one I was a part of. My last year, we did a play about kind of based on Don Quixote. Yeah. And they were called the Quixotians, and it was a very magical world. We had like rappers and acrobats, and we had everything. It was crazy. So a little bit of everything.
I think anybody down in Alabama should have to go see. Is it open to the public, or is it just closed?
Yeah, it's open to the public. Oh. It is. Yeah.
Man, if I ever find myself in Alabama at some point during that, I'm heading over.
You gotta go. February. It's always in February.
In February? Okay. And hey, I'm in Canada, so I will get out of here in February to anywhere warm. So
yeah, I guess it'll be warm compared to there.
Yeah, I will take it. I may have to find a reason to leave. Okay. So you graduated from Alabama. Did you always want to go to New York City, or was that kind of a spur of the moment? Like, I got to do something with this career.
No, I think once I decided to go to college for, oh, excuse me.
It's okay.
Once I decided to go to college for theater, then it was like the next step is New York. It's just when I knew to be the next step. So it was just kind of always in the plans to come up.
Is not Miami? Does Miami even have what's the theater scene in Miami? Do you know what it's like, or is?
Yeah, it's actually grown quite a lot in the last few years, but it wasn't that big of a scene when I went to college. So I had always thought I'd go back there, but then in terms of theater, there wasn't that many opportunities. But that's changing. They've had a couple of professional theaters pop up and doing really great, interesting New York. And so it's a thing that now I'm thinking about, like maybe, there is a world where I could go back there for a little bit and do some theater.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm hearing that, places that you don't think are necessarily theater beds are starting to grow that way. I was talking with a woman who writes shows. She's in Nashville, and she writes musical theater. So, that makes
that's
sense.
Awesome.
So yeah, that area scene is starting to grow. Nashville has a huge country scene, of course, with the music,
right,
but not musical theater. So that's cool. I love hearing that non-traditional, I guess, for lack of a better term, places are starting to grow their theater world, their musical theater. Awesome. So you went to New York City. How much of a culture change was that going, I guess, from there to there? Was that a big deal, or did you find it easy?
I found it pretty easy. I had come up quite a few times. My mom had gone to high school and middle school here. So I had visited several times as a kid. And there was, of course, with anybody moving to New York, there's an adjustment period because it is a very frantic pace. And, at the time we moved, not everyone had an iPhone. So there's a lot of getting lost on the subway. So that happened for a while.
Yeah.
But other than that, it felt really natural to be I just felt like this is where I wanted to be. It's very cosmopolitan. There's so much to do for my want of wanting to do a million things at all times. It's very much fits that.
Very nice. So was your first experience in the New York theater scene, was it writing or was it acting?
It was both.
Oh, okay.
So I moved here in January of 2009, and my writing partner and I, Stephen Anthony Elkins, who wrote Pedro Pan with me, he's also my husband. So we moved up here together. Nice. And we submitted to this short musical festival, and with a couple of friends, we wrote our first short musical outside of college. It was called Acceptance, about the 5 stages of grief. And we performed in it, and we wrote it, and we put it up, and we did that one little festival. And because of that, they asked us to perform it at 2 other theaters, and we did that for a little while, and that kind of led to several jobs. So that was kind of our way in, was through writing.
Very nice. So before we go into Pedro Pan, so this first show, what's become of it?
It still exists. It's a song cycle. So we haven't done anything with it. We performed it at a couple of concerts, but we're thinking about revisiting it. It's just kind of exists in its own little world.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about Pedro Pan, the show that we play on our sampler platter. Tell us about the synopsis first. What is it about?
And so Pedro Pan is about a little boy named Pedro who is sent to America by his parents to escape the growing dangers of communism in 1960s Cuba. So in about 1960 to 1962, there was a big movement called Operation Pedro Pan, in which 14,000 children were sent unaccompanied to the U.S. Because of fears of indoctrination and growing dangers in Havana. Had become pretty violent under the Castro regime. And so parents took the chance to get their kids out, because it's easier to get a visa to get your kids out by themselves, and in hopes that then they would meet up with them shortly after, as soon as they were able to get visas to come out.
Wow.
So the story follows Pedro and his journey as a 12-year-old boy, and him coming to New York and having to learn a new language, a new culture without his parents, and how he navigates that. So an immigrant story, but through the eyes of a child.
Wow, it's very cool. Is it based on one particular person, or just an agglomeration? You know what I mean?
It's a conglomeration of stories. It's kind of very loosely based on my parents' experience. Both of them were Cuban immigrants. They both immigrated as children. My mom came to New York, and my dad went to Florida. But they both left. My mom was around 11 years old, and my dad was around the same age, 12. They'll hate me if I don't get the ages right, but they had stepping stones before they came to the U.S. So I know they left earlier than when they arrived here. My mom went to Spain first. My dad went to Mexico first, until they waited for acceptance to get to the U.S. But it was very traumatic for both of them. You have to leave with just the clothes on your back. You get one suitcase, and they go through that and search it at the airport. You're not allowed to take any valuables, anything of worth. And those were the stories that I grew up hearing. And so when I was commissioned to write a piece, I was originally commissioned to write a children's theater piece, and that's how Pedro Pan came about. I was researching folk stories and trying to see if that was my way into a children's theater story. And I ran across the website of Operation Pedro Pan, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to write about. This is my parents' story. And so I researched a lot of stories of children who had to come here by themselves, and it's all became one story.
Wow. I can't even imagine having to go through that. How bad it must be that you send off your children, on their own.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it. So you wrote the lyrics and book?
I wrote the book. I faked some lyrics. Basically, I'm like, here, Stephen, this is what I want the song to say. And as the composer lyricist, he makes that happen.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned that he's your husband as well, right?
Yes.
So how was that working with each other? Because I know when you as a team, sometimes there are not problems, but conflicts between people, because you have different writing styles and stuff like that. You took it to another level, of course, because not only do you have to work together, you got to live together and see each other all the time. How is that working with each other?
Oh man, it's great. It can be really challenging, but it's really great because we can be, what makes it challenging is also what makes it really a great collaboration is that we can be so completely and brutally honest with each other. Whereas, with the writing partner, a different collaborator, you kind of have to try to spare feelings as you're trying to give feedback. I think Stephen would differ on this. I think he would say he would want some of that from me, but what I love is that I can just get to the point and say, this isn't working for me because of this. And sometimes we have to take a moment and step into the other room, but then we'll come back. We can dig in.
Well, at least you're arguing or about something that's business, right? It's not personal.
Right. Exactly.
It's when it moves into the personal, then obviously you gotta.
Yeah. Then you're writing, so you feel a little exposed. I know there's been times I've come in the scene and he's looking at the scene and he's like, "No, this is not great." And I'm like, "But I just spent hours on this." And he's like, "Now you know how I feel."
Oh man. So how long was the writing process from, I guess, conception to when you finally were able to get it on some kind of stage?
So it was really fast. We were commissioned in October of 2013 and we had our first performance February of 2014. Wow. So less than 6 months we put it from idea to the stage. And that was the very first production. That was still a TYA show. We've kind of transitioned into a longer family musical. But that was 40 minutes, I think was our first show. And then since then we went to Fringe and then Nymph, and each time that we did a new production, it grew and grew. And so now it's more of like an 80-minute show. So, but that very first one was about half of that.
Wow. And but that first performance, or that set of performances, how was the audience reaction to that story? Were there a lot of people in the audience who were able to relate because they lived through that, or just from Cuban descent or anything like that? How was the audience reactions?
The audience reactions are really emotional. I remember specifically we had been lucky and had a feature on Univision, which is the Spanish language TV channel here in New York. And we were able to get some of that audience in, which was really exciting for us. Not a ton, but we did get some. And one of the audience members was a little girl, and she was about 10 years old. And she said that she had lived that story. She had immigrated from South America just a few years prior, had gotten here and not had any friends, and luckily met some folks that had also just immigrated from somewhere in Central or South America, and they kind of took her under their wing. And so she was in tears after the show saying, like, wow, this was my experience. And that was really powerful. And then in terms of the rest of, the Cuban American experience, it was mostly, my family that came from all over. Mm-hmm. But folks, what I was really blown away by was that, we set out to write this TYA show, and you could hear the entire audience just like weeping towards the end of the show, and when Pedro has to leave Cuba. And it just kind of told us that there was something more there, that there's something that we needed to continue to push and to write, because it was affecting people in a really visceral way. And so that was really informative for us and kind of set us on this path that we continued for the next 5 years, trying to put it up as many places as we could.
That's incredible. The emotion that must come through from experiencing that or remembering something like that. Like the comparable I can think of, and it's not exactly the same, but Come From Away. It's this human story where this, it's just pure emotion of humanity. And I that's kind of, when I went to see that show, that's kind of how I reacted. So I kind of get the idea. I don't necessarily exactly understand, but yeah, same type of thing. So that's fantastic. Congratulations on getting that up.
Thank you.
So you had the 40-minute show, and I guess did somebody see it and want to take it to the next level? Or how did that work?
In that first one, we had several people say, like, this is great, you should do something with this, but not really anyone that was, going to do that for us.
Yeah.
So we just started looking for opportunities, and we saw that the Fringe Festival was happening the next year, and we applied and got in.
Nice.
We were very shocked. And so then we put up a production at Fringe, and got really very lucky to get really great reviews and similar responses to the piece. And we did have a couple of like commercial producers interested, but they were more interested in kind of living in the TYA world, which we were happy to do, but kind of stripping down some of the emotional aspects of it. So we decided we didn't want to go down that path, and we kind of wanted to continue taking it to the next level, because our reviews were, you know, telling us, you know, we should look at Broadway, which seems so far away, but it seemed like maybe we should, you know, try to at least aspire to that.
Yeah.
And so then we later on just continued to try to self-produce. So we took it to NYMF in 2017, and we weren't accepted as a production, but we were accepted as a reading, which is actually what we really wanted, because production is really expensive to self-produce. And so we did the reading, and we sold out the reading, and it generated enough conversation that we're like, oh, we've got to do something else with it, but we don't know what. And then we were very lucky to win the Developmental Reading Series Award, which then gives us a subsidy towards a production in 2018. And so we did that in 2018 and mounted the full production again.
Wow.
But all of that was kind of on our own, but also with a lot of cheerleaders, a lot of people saying, you know, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the journey.
That's incredible. And you know what? That's an inspiration to everybody who's a creator of shows out there, that, you know, it can be done. You work hard and you just keep pushing along, and you'll hopefully succeed. And you were one of those stories of success. So that's congratulations on that. That's great.
Thank you. It's a lot of hard work, but you know, when you believe in what you're doing, you just kind of make it happen. And we're really lucky to have the support of friends and family and other theater makers that were like, how can we help? What can we do for you? Here's free rehearsal space. Here's, you know, we're going to donate to your, you know, GoFundMe. And we couldn't have done it without the support of a bunch of people that we're so forever grateful to.
That's great. Now, I guess today is almost the perfect atmosphere now, this time period for shows like yours, because we have the diversity now that is happening, that's surging forward. What's that like? Did you for yourself as you know, as a Latinx artist and creator? What's it look like out there in the world?
You know, I think things are changing, and it's really exciting. It's definitely a different world in a lot of ways than it was when we first started in 2014. I felt like we didn't see a whole lot of stories like that we were writing. And I think there's definitely more. I still think there's a lot of barriers for specifically Latinx work. You know, outside of John Leguizamo's piece a couple years ago, Latinx History for Morons, and Lin-Manuel's obviously Hamilton. There's not really a representation on Broadway in terms of Latinx writers or creative teams. So there's still a giant barrier, I think, in terms of reaching that level, that next level.
Okay.
On Your Feet, of course, happened recently, and so that was a big deal for the community.
Nice.
But you can name the three that have happened.
But you know what? At least I always say, you know, it's only slow, but at least it's going in the right direction.
Totally.
And it takes time, unfortunately. Like in a perfect world, we should all just, you know, everything should be just everything. But you know, unfortunately, we don't live in that perfect world yet. I've completely what I was going to say. Sometimes I get sidetracked. Maybe sometimes I should prepare questions, but you know what? The spontaneity then just goes away from what's happening. I was talking in New York and specifically in the Latinx community. Do they go to theater as much as other people? Because I was here, I had a conversation, an interview with a man named Danny, and he's a Black man, and we were talking about how, you know, the representation within musical theater and theater in general, but we don't have a lot of also Black patrons coming out to the show, and it's because they don't see representation, but without representation, they don't come. And if they don't come, it's that cycle. How is it down there as well for the Latinx community? Do they go to a lot of theater, musical theater?
I think it depends on the show. I think we definitely, in terms of our experience, like we really tried to get, like we did a lot of community outreach trying to get folks in the theater, and we were able to get some, but not as many as we wanted to. I'd say like maybe 5 to 10% of the audience. And we were really hoping to get at least, 50%. And so I think there is still some work to be done in terms of getting folks in the theater. I will say when I sat in on Latinx History for Morons, like, there was a huge audience surrounding, and so I think it just depends on the show and the outreach. But I think that is another layer of getting folks to the work is how do we reach the communities that have not seen themselves represented, and how do we create that bridge to get them in the theater.
Do you have an answer for that? I know I don't.
I don't.
No.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah. No. And that's always my question. We always want more representation, but how? And I don't know how we figured this out. And that's the problem. I think we all need to sit down and go, how do we do this? So, and I don't have the answer. So, oh, well. We'll keep pushing forward, and people like yourself will keep putting the shows out there, and people will start coming and seeing them. So that's awesome.
Totally.
So what else have you been doing outside of Pedro Pan? You do some directing, some writing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So recently I've been working as an assistant or associate director. So I worked on Evita at City Center in November as an associate to the amazing Sammy Canold. And then just recently I was working on Gloria, A Life, directed by Diane Paulus. I was assisting Diane. It was written by Emily Mann, a play that I've been lucky to be a part of for the last year and a half. It started off Broadway, and then went to McCarter, and then A.R.T. And then also at the same time, Stephen and I are still writing. We just finished a commission for a theater in Alabama called Red Mountain Theater. We did a educational script called The Garcia Sisters.
Cool.
And so a short musical. And then we're also working on a new project about Salome and John the Baptist, a kind of retelling of that story through a 2020 lens. And that's kind of what we've been up to. Those are the projects, and having many irons on at the same time, and trying to see which one's going to be ready.
And that's the thing.
Is that the phrase? I always say those things wrong.
Well, that's great to hear that you're still throwing stuff out there, and it's a long process, right? It's funny. Yeah. Our business is so different than everything else, right? You're in something else. You're in food. For example, you're a chef. You prepare, it's out. You put it onto the next one. It takes years for us to do anything, right? And we.
Yep.
So it's good to hear you're plugging away. And if you ever have anything coming up on stage that's open to the public, you let me know, and we will promote the heck out of it for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. Because like I said, we got to support each other in this community to grow and get bigger and better. Well,
and how about you? Do you have stuff coming up?
I am too busy doing this radio station. There lies the problem. I know I have stuff that I want to do, but I'm doing this instead, which it fills me and with happiness. Because I got stopped my other job about a year and a half ago, and I said, you know what, I want to do something that makes me happy. I'm going to be poor, but I'll be happy. So
happiness is everything.
I know. And so, I'll start to make money at some point, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And I get to talk to people like yourself. I've got to go down to New York and meet people, and I'm going to Pittsburgh. I'm going to Chicago in the next little bit. Hopefully, if things don't go weird with the virus, but I'm going to try and get down to New York again for October. So I'm having a good time.
Congrats.
So
yeah, it's awesome. Well, this is great. It's so great that you do this for artists. It's really, really special. So I'm really grateful.
Not a problem. I do what I can. So Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today and telling us a little bit about yourself and the show. But Before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. Now, there's no right or wrong answer, but there's a wrong answer. So
Okay.
be prepared for this.
No pressure.
Get ready. All right. Question number 1, Weber or Sondheim?
Oh, yikes. That's rough. Oh, God. Oh, Sondheim.
And why?
Because I think No One Is Alone is one of the most beautiful songs that's ever existed in the history of the world. I don't know why that song, but that song.
It's a good answer. And okay, for this one, there is no right or wrong answer. It's more of an opinion based. And I always find it depends on where you grew up. Like I talk to people in the UK or in the States or Australia, they all have slightly different answers and different reasons why. So you got this one correct. So question number 2. What is the biggest difference you've found between Miami, Alabama, and New York, just in general? Some things that you go, oh, I didn't expect that.
Oh, wow. That's a big one. Well, I mean, Miami's so sunny and the food is incredible. So and you can't get that food. Even in New York, there's a big Cuban population here, but it's not the same. So that's what makes Miami really unique. Alabama, folks are really nice. They're really nice to you. They pass by you and they wave at you. And that's something that Miami and New York do not have. We like keep walking and we're like, whoa, creep, why are you looking at me? And then New York, I think New Yorkers get a bad rap, but they will help you out in a pinch. They'll just have an attitude about it. They'll be like, you fell on the ground. That's your own fault. Here you go. And then keep walking. Did I answer that? Did I answer the question?
You totally answered the question.
Okay, good.
You go to New York with a preconceived notion of how people are. And then when I went there, because I hadn't been there like, 20 years, and people were so nice. Well, quote unquote nice, right?
They are.
But they're quick, they're fast, and they're on their way, but they're still, pleasant. So yeah, I was, except for the traffic. The traffic is insane, and the people on the bicycles. I don't know how they're not all dead because
it's very scary. I've ridden bikes. It's scary.
Like I don't understand it. So that still throws me. But the people themselves are very nice.
They're very nice.
Cool. All right. 3rd question, most important question, to make or break. Audiences eating food in the theater, yes or no?
Oh man, that depends. Like if it's a dinner theater, then they can.
Yes. Okay.
But definitely not chips. They're very annoying.
Yes.
And popcorn. That should just not happen. Or those candies with those wrappers. The little grandmas got their wrappers. Oh, that's rough.
Like they should know by now. Open it up. It's not like they've never been to theater before, people. Right? Don't open during the show your candies. Open them beforehand. But all right. Well, that is the correct answer. I always go with no.
Good.
I always go with no because A, it's annoying when you hear those chips and those candy. But B, for me, it's always the garbage people leave on the floor afterwards.
Yeah, that too.
And that just drives me insane. People. I feel sorry for the ushers. Come on. Did you grow up in a garbage bin? Just take your stuff out. Throw it away. But awesome. So 3 correct answers. Congratulations. You don't really win anything, but my respect.
I got time.
Exactly. Once again, thank you again so much, Rebecca. Pedro Pan sounds great. People should listen to it on our shows. Go to the website also for Pedro Pan. Check that out as well. Congratulations, and hopefully our paths will cross at some point. If I'm in New York.
I'm sure they will.
Wonderful. All right. That was Rebecca, the creator of Pedro, half the creator of Pedro Pan. Tune in next week as we speak with other people or peoples about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am still your host, Jean-Paul Jovanoff, for Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio, and I will see you when I see you.